So now that the 2015 NBA draft is officially in the books, a lot of us like to talk about grading drafts and the biggest winners and the biggest losers. So what I'm here to do is give you my biggest winners and biggest losers from the 2015 NBA draft. Let's start off with the positive, shall we? Let's get that out of the way, and then we'll get to the real fun. Let's talk about some of the winners, the teams that really helped themselves in this particular case. Well, first off, before I get to the teams, I'll say a big winner on this night had to be John Calipari. The fact that he had 6 guys drafted, including 4 of them in the lottery, gives you an awful lot of goodwill in the recruiting landscape when you go to these prospects' homes. You're going up against the big-time programs like the Dukes and the Carolinas, and you can run in there and you could sit there and say, we are every bit the prestigious program as them, if not more so, and you come as a top-flight recruit to me. I'm not going to bullshit you and try to sell you on this school crap. We are a NBA farm system, and we know it. I will get you to the dance. Trust in me. And frankly, if you're going to go anywhere, why would you go to, let's say, play for a Roy Williams if you want to get to the NBA? Go to play for Calipari. He's going to give you a lot more freedom. He's going to put you in a situation that makes you look better to NBA scouts and executives. Yeah, Calipari was a huge winner, that greaseball motherfucker. But I'll give him credit for this. He doesn't really, I don't think, try to bullshit what he is and what his program is. He is what a lot of other programs are, but they pretend to not be. At least he's upfront and honest about it. Now let's get to some of the teams that I thought really did well for themselves and really helped themselves out a lot in this 2015 NBA draft. The biggest winners, in no particular order. I'll start off with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Sometimes the toughest thing to do is to do what you should do and you're supposed to do. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, they only had one real option for them in their situation with that #1 overall pick, and that was to take Karl Anthony Towns, a versatile big man from Kentucky. And that's exactly what they did. They've got another #1 overall pick on their roster and a guy that really fits well into what they're doing in Minnesota and brings a lot to the table that Minnesota needed. This is the type of pick when you factor in an Andrew Wiggins, guys already in the mix like Ricky Rubio and Zach LaVine and so on and so forth. This is a team in Minnesota that, yes, while they were bad last year for a plethora of reasons, they're not going to be that bad anymore. And this is a team that's starting to build something nice even in the Western Conference that they're stuck in. You know, Karl Anthony Towns was a great get for them, as was Tyus Jones. I love the fact that Minnesota took their 2 second-round picks and packaged them to move up to 24 where Cleveland was to get Tyus Jones. Jones makes a ton of sense to me as a backup point guard that can come in and bring some leadership, bring some of the skills you need out of a point guard off the bench. You're not going to expect him right away to play major minutes, but he's a guy that could step in if and when the next Ricky Rubio injury happens. Here's a guy that has some big game experience and has performed well in those big-time pressure moments. And here's also a guy, too, when talking about Minnesota and building for the future, provides you with some potential flexibility because Rubio's cap number at some point in time might be something you don't want to carry anymore, especially with his injury-prone nature. Tyus Jones on a good team could be a nice role-playing type of starting point guard. I love what Minnesota did in this draft. I look at the Miami Heat. Justice Winslow fell to them at the 10th overall pick. Just due to circumstances and situations alone, the Miami Heats were monster winners here. The Heat absolutely made a killing here. They truly did. They got, to me, the #1 player in this entire draft with the 10th overall pick. And I like their selection of Josh Richardson, the guard from Tennessee in the second round. They got a couple of big athletic wings. It was a good night for Miami, but it wouldn't have mattered who the hell else they took. They got Justice Winslow 10th overall. That's enough to get it done. One team that I thought did really well for themselves based off of their situation, sometimes, depending on a team's situation, it's not always about who you take. It's about the maneuvering that you make. Now, look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. They could have sat there and just kept Tyus Jones at number 24, But because of all the players they've got to worry about this offseason in terms of getting deals done for LeBron, potentially Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith, Matthew Dellavedova, uh, the Cavaliers needed as much free money as they could possibly find. And taking a guy like Tyus Jones and pawning him off to Minnesota and getting 2 second-round picks in those non-guaranteed contracts where you could get a guy like Seti Osman, you could potentially draft and stash him for a little bit overseas, and then getting a role-playing big man like a Raheem Christmas, maybe somebody you could put down at the MBDL level, but somebody that might be provide you with some front court depth and insurance in case a Tristan Thompson and or Kevin Love leaves. I thought the Cleveland Cavaliers did well for themselves considering the situation. I know it's tempting because of where they at and because people always assume that immediate help's going to come from the draft, that a lot of people would have wanted to just keep Tyus Jones at number 24. But for what the Cavaliers needed to do and based off of their situation, I thought they handled this perfectly. Couldn't have done much better. The Toronto Raptors, I like the selection of DeLon Wright at number 20. You got a big point guard that can really defend, in my opinion. A guy you can also throw out there at the 2. But then also being able to get a guy like Norman Powell and a future first-round pick for Grievous Vasquez. Losing Vasquez isn't the best thing in the world. It was a nice role player, a nice bench guy to have, but that's kind of what you drafted Wright for. But to be able to take, basically, here's what they did. They took a backup point guard for them in Vasquez, turned him into a second-round pick this year, and a 2017 first-round pick. That was incredible. That was a hell of a move for the Toronto Raptors. One of the few teams that did a really good job of positioning themselves well in the future. And while Milwaukee's 2017 first-round pick might not be that incredibly high, it's still a first-round pick. Those commodities can be very, very valuable. And one other team I thought did really well for themselves, honestly, were the Brooklyn Nets. Being able to sit there and take Mason Plumlee and Pat Connaughton and turning them into Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, I thought that was good. They needed an athletic defending wing like Hollis-Jefferson, and this was a team that was looking to move up in this draft. They technically weren't able to move up from 29, but what were they able to do? They found a way to get it done, package off Plumlee, which was something that I guess had to happen, and they got a guy like Hollis-Jefferson. And then at 29, they drafted Chris McCullough from Syracuse, a guy with some big-time upside that could be a real steal and value pick for where they got him in the draft. I really like what Brooklyn did as well. Well, enough with the positive crap. Let's talk about the bums and the losers in the 2015 NFL Draft. We'll start off with some individual players. You had some highly touted and thought-of prospects over the past couple of years like Cliff Alexander, Christian Wood, Robert Upshaw, and Aaron Harrison all went undrafted. This is unfortunately part of the reality in the NBA when so many underclassmen declare. There are going to be some big-name prospects and some former 5-star recruits that end up getting undrafted or 4-star recruits that end up getting undrafted. And these were a few of these guys this year. You had Upshaw with the off-the-court crap and the heart issue, Christian Wood, people questioning his maturity, Cliff Alexander, a combination of things, including maturity, positional fit, Aaron Harrison, wondering if he was just good enough. These were guys that at different points in time were being thought of as first-round picks, and none of them ended up getting drafted at all. That makes them big-time losers, obviously. I look at the Philadelphia 76ers, and my issue is not necessarily so much with them drafting Jahlil Okafor or the fact that they are very heavily into draft and stash. It's the fact that in this draft, they basically took nothing but front court players. At some point in time, you've got to get some type of infusion of young depth and talent in the backcourt, you would think. And, you look at it, maybe it's hard to fault him for taking Okafor number 3, even though I didn't think he was the best player on the board at that particular point in time. But everybody they drafted was a front court player in some way, shape, or form. You have several international draft and stash big men, a total of 3 draft and stash guys. It's hard to figure out what the Philadelphia 76ers are doing. They had 5 second-round picks. I would have thought they maybe would have been able to figure out a way to turn those couple of those picks either into a second first-rounder in this year's draft, which I thought would have really been nice for them. Maybe they could have been moving up to where Cleveland was, to where they could have been in the possibilities to get a guy like Tyus Jones, who would have made a world of sense to me for Philadelphia. Or taking some of those second-round picks and turning them into future commodities, future second-round picks, or maybe even a future first-round pick. I didn't like what the Sixers did in the entirety, in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things. Then you have the Boston Celtics. And part of this is the fact that there was no big move from the Celtics. Once Okafor dropped the three, they didn't figure out a way to get that done. Cauley Stein went 6, so they couldn't trade up for him. They didn't trade up into the top 10 to get anybody else. Boston just kind of sat there, and then they took Rozier 16th. I didn't really understand that pick. I'd understand it at 28 because you could argue at that point in time, best player available, but at 16, you just can't. And on a team that already has a very undersized point guard in Isaiah Thomas, another point guard type in a Marcus Smart, why are you investing a mid-first round pick on a point guard who really doesn't play the point all that well, and he's all of about 6'1", 6'1.5"? I know the guy can really defend and really get after it, but god dang, I mean, where is he going to fit on the floor with Smart and Thomas? You're drafting a guy that's basically going to potentially be used in a limited capacity. Your hope is that maybe this would be a sign that they're going to trade off maybe a Marcus Smart at some point in time. But again, when you look at the Boston draft in general, a lot of smaller guys, as Jalen Rose kept saying throughout the night, apparently they want to run a 6'7" and under team. Well, that's the way it kind of feels. I understand it's a guard and perimeter-driven league. I'm a big proponent of that. But some of these guys have got to have some size at some point in time, too, and I thought they could have used a little more in the front court or a little more size on the wing. So I didn't really like what Boston did. And then you got Sacramento. For some inexplicable reason, they took Willie Cauley-Stein, number 6 overall. Now, Cauley-Stein was 7th on my board. Even though he's a big man that doesn't rebound all that well, I think he will rebound better at the NBA level. But this is a guy that is a big-time rim protector, a big-time shot blocker, a guy that has that great defensive versatility to guard anybody in a pick-and-roll situation, anybody on the floor. I mean, those are elite traits. He could be an all-NBA defensive type of guy. But you don't draft him when guys like Emmanuel Mudiay and Justice Winslow are on the board. They are bigger needs and better players. This is exactly why the Sacramento Kings are who the Sacramento Kings are, and why the Sacramento Kings continue to draft where the Sacramento Kings do year in and year out. They pass on superior players for inferior players at lesser positions of need because they are stupid. It is that simple. They are stupid. And all this focus and talk and emphasis on DeMarcus Cousins, maybe there's a reason the guy might not want to be in Sacramento long term. Maybe it's because the people in charge of Sacramento absolutely fucking suck. And this drafting of Willie Cauley-Stein number 6 business is just more example of that. But the biggest losers of all have to be the freaking Charlotte Hornets. Just what the fuck? Just what the fuck? What I don't understand about Michael Jordan is here's a guy that hated Jerry Krause for so many damn years, and I understand why. So now you've basically incorporated a Jerry Krause draft philosophy, which is every year you seem like you can't get away from your fixation with taking some type of goddamn power forward or big man in the first fucking round. If you're the Charlotte Hornets, and you've already taken Cody Zeller 2 years ago, Noah Venla, who you just traded last year, and this time, you've got the opportunity to get somebody like a Justice freaking Winslow or even a Devin Booker. And you look at the fact that you're drafting in the top 10 and you get another draft yet again, and you decide that you're going to take another big man from the Big Ten yet again. The perfect example of just because people have played the game, just because people work in the game, doesn't mean they have a fucking clue how to run an NBA draft. What the fuck was Charlotte thinking? And in fact, I'll be doing a video on this topic coming up, talking about just how ridiculous this draft was for the Charlotte Hornets. This is not me putting Frank Kaminsky on blast, because I like Kaminsky as a prospect. I like him as a player. I think he's a solid pro. But the fact that Charlotte fucking took him here was absolutely astoundingly stupid. And for all the greatness of Michael Jordan as a player, it is only equaled, if not surpassed, by him and his organization's complete incompetence when it comes to the NBA draft. And above all else, I think the biggest losers of all in the 2015 NBA draft were honestly the Charlotte Hornets. You're welcome to tell me if I'm right or wrong, but goddamn, Charlotte, what the fuck?